Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Is Charlie Adelson, now that he's been sentenced to life without parole, really going to stay in jail for his entire life or from prison? Or is he likely to get out on appeal? We're going to talk about that tonight. The holidays are fast approaching. I hope you are fully decorated. We are way decorated around here. I am an insane person when it comes to Christmas decorations. So we keep 5 enormous racks of decorations in the attic. So I'm very curious, what do you do for decorating? Do you decorate a lot for the holidays? So tonight we're going to be covering Charlie Adelson. On November 6th, he was convicted of murdering his ex-brother-in-law, Dan Markel, an FSU law professor and a Harvard Law grad. Now, prosecutors say, and the jury found, that through his girlfriend, he had hired 2 hitmen to kill Dan Markel, and they shot him in the head while he sat in his car in the garage of his own home in Tallahassee, Florida. So let me double check that everything is coming in. I'm looking for the notes in the chat. So, okay, good. We're good. All right. So it took 8 years for the state to try Charlie Adelson. Markel was killed all the way back in 2014. But last month, Charlie Adelson was finally convicted, and now he's been sentenced to life without parole. Tonight, we're going to be talking about 3 different things. We're going to be watching a very abbreviated version of the sentencing, and I'm going to ask you to look at a couple of things in particular. Then we're going to look at Charlie's own opinions about whether he's going to get out on appeal. And then we're going to talk a little bit about whether he's right, just based on what we know so far and on the truth about the way appeals work. So as an extra bonus at the end, we're going to be doing a little segment. One of the questions that is the most asked that y'all have been putting in the chat and in the comments asking about is, what about the Markel grandparents and their grandchildren, because they've been separated for a very long time. And you've been asking, have they been seeing each other? And will they get to see each other more now? We'll talk a little bit about that and look at some things that Dan Markel's father, Phil, said at the sentencing hearing. So, and then finally, we're going to be doing a little outro. We are introducing memberships coming up soon. And so we've been doing, one of the perks is going to be a special emoji that you can use in the chat or in the comments while we're talking. And in the outro, you're going to be able to watch our own Marlon design one of those. So be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and we will get started. I want to give a special shout out to Angela, a longtime subscriber, and I'll say a little bit more about that at the end of the show tonight. So first, let's get started with talking about the sentencing. Now, I'd like you to note his vastly different appearance. Now, let's take a look. I'm going to add this to the stage, and I'm going to switch over to, this is what Charlie Adelson looked like at trial. And so I want you to note his vastly different appearance during the sentencing, partly due to the fact that being in isolation, he probably was not allowed a razor. So that's part of it. But I think that there's more to it than that. And I'm interested in what you think, whether you think he looked substantially different. And then, so we're going to take a look at what happened at sentencing. This is just a very short version. We haven't done it yet on the channel, so we're going to go over that real quickly.
Family in particular.
And to be clear, I always do that. I start it up and then I'm like, oh, and wait, the thing you needed to know about what you just heard is, so this is Phil Markel talking. It's the last little sentences he said before he finished up, and he's going to talk about what the family believes, the family of Dan Markel believes would be a fair and just punishment for Charlie Adelson.
Charlie Adelson has been a major cause of our heartbreak and the murder of our son Danny and the loss of our 2 grandchildren. It is satisfying to see justice being done.
What is the state's argument with regard to sentence, at least as it concerns counts 2 and 3?
In regards to counts 2 and 3, Your Honor, we are seeking the maximum sentence. We're asking for consecutive 30-year sentences on both of those. The only other matter, Your Honor, is that in reference to costs of prosecution, we've been attempting to gather up some of the necessary financial paperwork from the FBI and TPD and my office as well to see if we can come to an agreement with the defense on what cost of prosecution should be ordered in this case. We have not been able to do that yet, so I would ask for your honor to reserve that issue for 90 days. It's possible, as I said, we can reach an agreement on it, but if not, I would ask for a hearing sometime around 90 days to make a determination about cost of prosecution.
So we can unpack a few things from that. The first is the family of Dan Markel is asking for the maximum punishment, and then the state comes in and requests the exact same thing. Counts 2 and 3 relate to the solicitation and the conspiracy counts, and the state is asking for the maximum sentence of 30 years and also asking that it run consecutively. What that means is that there would first be one sentence and then the other sentence added onto it, not running at the same time. So it would be a life sentence for the murder plus 30 years for the solicitation plus 30 years for the conspiracy. And so that's what they're asking for. And so why bother, you might wonder? Why would anybody bother to tack on 30 years to a life sentence? It's life without parole. That's what the law requires. And so why bother to add 30 more years, much less to add 30 more years and then 30 more years on top of that? Why would you even do that? And in practical terms, it doesn't make a difference when we don't get a life plus 30 years just because that's what the sentence is. So in practical terms, it doesn't make a difference, but it does change things in terms of the appeal, because it makes the appeal less likely to be effective. It makes it more likely that the person will be in jail for or prison for a longer time. It makes that a more likely event, because unless the appeal covers every single basis and is complete overturning, then some of this is going to be upheld, is the general theory. So it makes it much less likely that the person will get out on parole. So that is, I think, part of the reason for that.
Mr. Rauschbaum, do you have any argument to make on behalf of your client as to counts 2 or 3?
Judge, we understand the situation. We just ask that those counts be run concurrently.
So what Charlie's team is asking for, I'm forgetting to use our fancy new, what would you call it, layout. So what he's asking for is, look, Judge, why don't we at least throw in a little hope there, which is it runs at the same time. So if some miracle should occur, he wouldn't get 30 years on top of life without parole. Instead, maybe there'd be some hope someday something would happen and he would be able to get out. But if you run them consecutively, it's not very likely. So, Judge, we'd like to ask that you run them concurrently. So at the same time. So once you serve 30 years, you've already served the other 30 years and it's all done. And that's what they would like. So now Charlie is going to speak.
Very well. Mr. Adelson, I'm going to give you the opportunity to make a statement if you wish. You do not have to speak. However, this is your opportunity if you choose to do so.
I do.
You may stand.
Same. I would just like to say that I maintain my innocence.
So there you have it. Short and sweet. It was a lot like Murdoch's, but less wordy. And Murdoch did 2. One with his murder was much briefer. And then, of course, there was one with the financial crimes, which was really, really long. But the one that he made at his actual sentencing for the murders was actually somewhat similar to this. He continued to maintain his innocence. And that's exactly what Charlie is doing here. Now, one of the consequences of a life sentence without parole is that there's not a lot of pressure on the defendant to show remorse, because it doesn't really make a difference. The judge is going to, under the law, sentence him to life without parole. That's what the judge has to do. So it's the same that was true in Alec Murdaugh's case. And certainly Charlie was not showing any remorse. He wasn't saying anything like he was sorry. Instead, he was sticking to his story, just as Alec Murdaugh did with respect to whether he killed his wife and son. Not the financial crimes, but whether he killed his wife and son. And now the judge is about to pass the sentence.
Well, please rise. I'm now going to pronounce the sentence. With the jury having found you guilty of all 3 counts that you were charged with in your indictment of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and solicitation to commit first-degree murder, I am going to adjudicate you guilty of all 3 at this time, and you are going to be sentenced as follows. As to count 1, the first-degree murder count pursuant to section 782.04 and 775.082 Florida statutes, you are sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of release or parole. As to count 2, you are going to be sentenced consecutively to 30 years in the Department of Corrections for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. As to count 3, you are going to be sentenced to 30 years in the Department of Corrections consecutively for solicitation to commit first-degree murder. Ms. Kappelman, I will reserve 90 days of jurisdiction to address the cost of prosecution in this case.
So the judge has gone with what the prosecution and what the Markels requested. The sentence will run consecutively. There will be the life sentence and 30 years on top of that, and then 30 years on top of that. That minimizes the chances that there would ever be a reason for anything like for him to get out. It would be very unlikely that he would ever get out. It makes an appeal, frankly, less worthwhile, less possibly effective. And so, and in case you wondered, the 90 days that they're talking about is related to giving the state an opportunity to gather together all of the information related to potential costs that may be assessed to costs of prosecution that might be assessed to Charlie Adelson. So the case isn't technically over until that happens. And of course, there is the appeal as well. And that's what we're going to be talking about. And in fact, so is the judge about to talk about this.
30 days to appeal both your conviction and now your sentence. Mr. Adelson, you are going to be fingerprinted today. And from here, you are going to be sent to the Department of Corrections to begin serving your sentence. Mr. Rauschbaum, if you please, can timely file the notice of appeal so that way there is no issues regarding any review.
And so with that, Charlie Adelson exited stage left, and he will not be heard from again except on appeal, and anything related to that, or if there were to be an overturned verdict, and if in that case there were to be a new trial. But already the judge was looking forward to that possible appeal and saying, let's be sure to get our documents in on time, because everybody knows he's going to appeal. That's not really much of a surprise. And that is what we are going to talk about next. Now, I want to say thank you to Marlon very much. I appreciate the super chat, and I agree completely. Shout out and prayers to all the people in our chat who were in a rough time, and he's written down some of the folks there. We are thinking about all of you. Thank you very much. And AJ Lowe, JJ, Mel, Judge Caprio, we're thinking about all of you. Glad you watch, and we're thinking about you. So now we're going to ask ourselves, what is Charlie's opinion about his chances on appeal? And believe it or not, we actually have a little bit of insight into that. And the reason is that some of the conversations between Donna Adelson, Charlie's mother, and Charlie from right after the verdict have been made public. All jail calls are recorded. People know that. And it even says that on a recording at the beginning. It says, press a button to acknowledge that you understand that this is something that you are hearing. But it was released, but these calls were released this week. Now in Florida, they are not typically released by the jail. Under a case law, they aren't normally released. And I've asked for my own copy. I've written to the state's attorney's office and requested my own copy of that. So I am taking these not, and I'm going to read something to you. I'm taking this not from something I received directly from the court, and I want you to know that. Instead, I've gotten it from audio that was published by a website, Pretty Lies and Alibis. I really enjoyed that. It's a great website or a great podcast. And so I expect it to be accurate, but I want to give you that caveat. That's where I got this information from. So the setting is Charlie's talking to his mother. The verdict they're processing it. It's just come in and they're trying to process that together. And they're talking about the judge's rulings in the case. And this is what Charlie says. He says, my general feeling, this is just my feeling, I'm not a lawyer, but my feeling is that he ruled, if anything, he gave us the benefit of the doubt because he didn't want to debate about it. And Donna, the mother, says, yeah, is that what Dan's saying? Dan Rashbaum, meaning Charlie Adelson's attorney. And Charlie says, well, I mean, he made that comment to me that he like the judge ruled in our favor a number of times. He let him, I think meaning Rashbaum, bring stuff in, and I either said it or I heard it that he meant it, that there's not going to be, a lot of things to say that were done wrong. I mean, you have to either say that the judge could tell you, didn't do your due process, because you didn't do anything improper. Like, what's your reason for wanting a new trial? So I want to talk for just a minute about whether Charlie is right, because what Charlie is saying is the judge ruled in our favor several times, and there may not be a lot of grounds for appeal. That's what he seems to be saying. Is he right about that? The answer is yes. It is definitely true that usually judges want to get all of the calls, 99.9% of the time. They want to get all the calls right in a trial, but there is discretion in there because on appeal, the appellate court is going to look at whether there were abuses of discretion. They aren't going to be fly-specking every single thing that the trial court did. So many judges believe that if a judge believes that there was a real advantage to one side, they may make, when they have discretion, rulings toward the other side. That way, there won't be any grounds for appeal. There will be less to argue on appeal. There has to be a reason that you take a case to appeal. There has to be something that was done wrong. You can't just go up to the appellate court and say, hey, the jury ruled against me, reverse it. That they won't do it. And you can't just say, the jury believed their witnesses. The jury didn't believe our witnesses, so reverse it. You're not going to get the case reversed if that's what you say to the appellate court. You have to have grounds for the case to be reversed. And in this particular case, it was a very cleanly tried case. There weren't a lot of rulings that went opposite Charlie that would be grounds for the appeal. Now, the Murdaugh case was different. The judge made some rulings there that would be something that an appellate court might consider, particularly the decision to let in the financial crimes. That was more of a judgment call that you might argue on appeal, but there was less of that in Charlie Adelson's case. There were still some issues, and I am no doubt that they will come up with a number of them, and there may be a number of them that we don't even know about that were argued in advance of trial. One place I can imagine they would go is with the wiretap evidence, with the evidence about the bump, arguing that it was done improperly, that it shouldn't have been admitted. I can also see some issues arising around the evidence from Katie Medbanawa, who was Charlie's ex-girlfriend, and the state says, jury agreed, Charlie hired her to hire two people to do the hit on Dan Markel. I can also see some of the questions asked of Wendy being raised. Charlie in the jail calls makes a good deal about references to her book, to Wendy's book, because the prosecution talked about Wendy's book and suggested that basically what happened here sort of was what happened in her book. Not entirely, but that there was a woman who was in a small Florida town and didn't want to be there and wanted to go to the big town. And a lot of the facts followed. And so Charlie felt like it was really unfair. But overall, that's kind of a small issue, references to her book, and more likely to be something that the appellate court is going to say, amounted to harmless error, which is the way it works on appeal. For most issues, the court will say either no error at all or, well, okay, maybe it should have been done differently, but let's be real. It didn't make that much of a difference. And so that's the kind of thing that I would expect. Because here is reality, and I want to show you a document. This comes from the Department of Justice itself. I'm going to go to our new format. I have to select it every time, so it's hard to remember that. Okay. This is from the U.S. Department of Justice by the Bureau of Justice Statistics, and they look at criminal appeals in state court, and it's really got some interesting facts in here. I'm just going to point out a handful to you. Nearly 2/3 of appeals were reviewed on the merits of the case, and a majority, I don't know why that's in blue. I didn't mean for it to be. Oh, there we go. Okay. I'm not trying to highlight that sentence. Nearly 2/3 of appeals were reviewed on the merits, and a majority of these appeals were upheld or affirmed the trial court decision. So that's 2/3, and appellate decisions were only considered affirmed when the appellate court upheld the entire trial court decision. That means the whole thing, not conspiracy, but not solicitation, not murder, but the whole thing, the whole decision. In 12% of appeals, appellate courts reversed, remanded, or modified a component of the trial court decision, and more than 1/3 of the appeals were not reviewed on the merits. So let's go down here. About 2% of all intermediate appellate court appeals were subsequently reviewed by the court of last resort. That means they went from the intermediate appellate court, like Court of Appeals, to the Supreme Court. That's what they're saying. And the reversal rates were highest for aggravating or mitigating factors that might affect the severity of the offense, which is not really an issue here. And talks about only 17% were reversed in 2010 for murder. So take a look at this graph right here. Do you see that figure down there? I don't think you can see oh, you can see my cursor. Okay, right here. Reversed, remanded, modified. I guess you can see it. I'm not sure. But the bottom left is only 12%. So if you take the total criminal appeals in state court, 12% get reversed or remanded or modified. That's a really, really small percentage. So what you can see from that is, yeah, it's really unlikely that once the decision is made, the die is cast. I think I have one more thing. Yep, one more thing. Once a decision is made, the die is cast. And at that point, what happens is what happens. And very rarely do you get reversed. That doesn't mean there isn't a shot. Of course there are, but the chances are pretty small. And so Charlie is, I think, being realistic there. Now, do we know for sure he said that? I don't know, but I will say this. If he were to say that, he would be being realistic, because that is pretty much the way it is. So and I thought you'd be interested in knowing how long is it going to take. The median days for time on appeal is record preparation, 69 days, and I doubt they will start that until that 90-day period is up. So we'll wait for the 90 days for the state to collect those things, then 69 days for preparing the record, then briefs back and forth, 81 days, then decision-making, 107 days. So it's basically going to be probably a year or so tacked on to right now before there's any sort of information about what the appellate court will do. All right, let me pull that out. And now I want to do the little bonus section that I mentioned to you, because I've gotten so many questions about the relationship between the Markels and their grandchildren, because one of the worst consequences of what happened was that Wendi Adelson took the kids to Miami, and ultimately the relationship between the Markels and the children was broken. Even their names were changed. So I wanted to show you just a short little clip. I think it's about a total of well, first I'm going to do like a 2-minute clip where you can hear Phil Markel talk about his son. I thought that would be interesting because we've been talking about this case for a long time. And here is a chance to learn a little bit more about Dan Markel. So let's put that up. And I think it's a little under 2 minutes.
Phil Markel. I am Dan Markel's father. Danny loved to socialize, dance, cook, entertain, and play sports, and dedicated himself wholeheartedly to everything that he did. He always looked to do his utmost to improve and achieve better results in every activity that he did. At about the age of 13, Danny developed the idea that he was going to Harvard University for his college education. He discovered that the acceptance requirements for Harvard were not only good grades, but also work for the community and charitable work. After years of hard work and determination, Dan was accepted to Harvard. He graduated from Harvard magna cum laude, went on to study at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem for 1 year, and then earned a master's in philosophy and political theory from Emmanuel College at the University of Cambridge in England. He returned thereafter to Harvard Law School to earn his law degree and went on to become an extremely successful lawyer, influential legal scholar. While Dan's career was important to him, family meant everything to Dan. Dan's marriage produced 2 boys, Benjamin and Lincoln, who were his absolute world and a loved thing to him. My life has been in total disarray since Dan's murder. There is not a single day in my life since Danny's death that in one way or another he does not enter into my thoughts. When I meet new people, the topic of discussion always comes up when they ask whether I have children. How do I respond?
So I wanted to play that to you just so you could get a little bit more of a flavor about who Dan Markel was. And I thought it was really moving the way his father described him. I cut it just very, very brief. It's heavily edited, but I wanted you to get a flavor of it. And now I want to talk about the question that everybody had and tell you he talked about this very question at the sentencing. Phil Markel did. I got lots of questions. What about the Markels and their grandkids? Were they able to keep the relationship with them? Will they get the kids? If Wendy were to be arrested, would the Markels get the children? And some people ask, they even got legislation passed in Florida to protect grandparent rights. Don't they have a good relationship because of that? Well, here is what Phil Markel said at sentencing.
Despite our persistent efforts, we still do not have a real relationship with Danny's sons, Ben and Lincoln. For 6 years, we were denied any and all visits with the boys. In the last 2 years, I've been permitted 2 60 to 90-minute visits, supervised visits. This limited contact is incredibly painful, and I feel like we have cut out of our lives. Not only have I lost my son, but I have effectively lost 2 of my grandkids as well. Even their family names have been changed from Markel to Adelson. While we work hard to help introduce a new bill in the state of Florida known as the Markel Act, which gives grandparents important rights, unfortunately, our relationship with Ben and Lincoln has not been materially improved. As this bill was coming to fruition, there was a lot of negative publicity in the press and media about Danny's ex-wife, Wendy. In my opinion, Wendy was focused on improving her public image, and as a result, extended an invitation to us to Ben's bar mitzvah. Ruth and I were invited to attend only the ceremonial part of this important stage in a Jewish boy's life. And we were not invited to participate in any reception typical of this celebration. But this invitation opened the door to one of the limited visits described above. We were able to arrange a brief 90-minute supervised visit with Ben and Lincoln, and this was a few weeks before the bar mitzvah. shortly after our brief visit, Charlie was arrested, and Wendy rescinded our invitation to the bar mitzvah. At the time, she said that they were going to either postpone or completely cancel this bar mitzvah ceremony. Neither of those happened. Excuse me.
Take your time, sir.
Instead, my understanding is that the Adelsons went on to have the bar mitzvah ceremony and party, all without the Markel family's presence or participation. Missing out on this important moment in Ben's life was incredibly painful. I also have no idea what the boys know of us, the entire Markel family, our history, etc., and especially how much we all love them and how we wish they were active part of our family. Both Ruth, sorry. Both Ruth are approaching 80 years of age. At this moment, we are healthy, but one does not know what tomorrow brings.
And let me say before I even get started on this next segment is be sure to put your questions in the chat. As we reach the end, I like to take a few questions. I'm not going to have a lot of time tonight, but if you have some, if you would put question marks at the beginning, and it'll be easier for me to spot. So I want to thank too Jamie, who is the perfect entree to exactly what I was going to talk about next. Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate the super chat. And she asked, are they actually going to get Wendy? She's the reason all this is happening. LOL. And also kudos to Georgia Kappelman. She's amazing. And so people ask me throughout this, what will happen to the Markel children if Wendy is arrested? And one of the things I have to point out is Wendy hasn't been charged. She hasn't been arrested. There are a few things that happened during the course of the trial, things we learned and heard about in the conversations between Donna and Charlie that might suggest she wasn't involved. Things, for example, like the conversation where Donna was trying to tell Charlie about the bump that had just happened, where an undercover agent had just handed her a newspaper article and made an extortion demand on her. The newspaper article related to Dan Markel's murder. And Donna immediately called her son Charlie and said, Charlie said, what is this about? And she said, it's about the two of us. It involves the two of us, both of us. And she doesn't say the three of us or the four of us. So she sort of seems to exclude Wendy and her husband, Harvey, the father of Wendy and also of Charlie. For that reason, it may be that Wendy will not be charged. I did a video early on where I explained why it was more likely that she would be charged based on the fact that there was a quick verdict back about Charlie. I think that would give the confidence to the prosecution that they had a strong case. But the case against Wendy is frankly different. It's different in nature from what they had against Charlie and from what they have now charged Donna with and the evidence they will present about Donna. So back to the question, what would happen to the children just in theory? One of the things that Phil Markel mentions, in addition to just the very heartbreaking story about how they missed this monumental milestone in their grandson's life, and they would have loved to have been there for his bar mitzvah, and they were invited and then uninvited, and for a reason they say was false. They were told, yeah, we're just, under the circumstances, we're just going to cancel this, but that was false. According to them, it wasn't canceled. They went ahead and did the whole party and everything. They just didn't invite the Markels. That was a way to uninvite the Markels. That's what he's saying. But he also points out that he and his wife are 80 and that they don't know how the kids have been told about them. What have the kids been told? Have they been told the Markels love you? The Markels would love to have you as part of their family? Who knows? And so what would a family court do with this? All of those things are going to have to be thrown into the hopper. What would the kids want? How old are the kids? And I'm not sure about that, their numbers right now, how old they are. What would the Markels be able to provide a home from them at their age? How long could they provide a home? Would they want to? Perhaps it would not be a possibility, but I think that's why he got so choked up with that. Oh, look at me. I'm in a tiny little picture all this time. Sorry about that. I think that that's part of the reason that he choked up, because it was such a difficult thing and such a difficult thing to consider. So let's take a look at some of the questions here. Okay, let's see. Chloe wants me to look at the recordings because he blames Georgia Kappelman. I did see that. I've listened to a lot of them. I just want to make sure I'm listening to the correct ones, because I had some questions about wanting to make sure about that. I just wanted to make absolutely sure before I said anything about it that I was listening to correctly what he was saying. Now, what he said about the appeal, that's accurate. Whether he said it or not, as I said, it's true. What he said is pretty much true. It will be difficult. So Donna said the kids saw the Markels for one before Dan was arrested. Okay, thanks, Chloe. I'll take a look at that. Pegasus wanted to know whether the brother doing the deed for the sister sounded similar to the Daybell case. Well, there certainly, these are families that are operating in very strange ways together. We saw that Lori Daybell and her soon-to-be, at the time he wasn't yet her husband, Lori was convicted. Chad still hasn't been convicted. He has yet to stand trial. We'll be doing that next year. But they were both charged, and Lori convicted with killing her children. And so I can certainly see that there are some issues family-wise that are similar between that. Okay, so, oh, wait, no, here's another one. Carrie asked me, Judge Everett didn't comment on the heinous nature of Charlie's crimes. Do you think this could be because he's the trial judge in Donna's case? So I don't know for sure what his reason would have been for not doing that. It was certainly safer not to do that. You think of what happened in the Alec Murdaugh case, because the judge made comments about that, and then the case gets sent back for a new trial, or at least for a hearing about whether there would be a new trial. And what actually then happens is that the defense has an argument, oh, well, you should be off the case because you've already said you think he's guilty. So I think that he avoided that sort of issue by not making a comment at all. All right, so I want to do a special thanks again. I want to say, oh, I have a new one from Cutley asking me, it seems Wendy's version of the kids getting to visit with the Markels is completely different from Mr. Markel's version. Can Wendy be charged with perjury? I would say that's an interesting question. I don't think perjury would be a likely result of this, but could she be cross-examined if what she said was false? Maybe, but it's really tangential. It's not directly related to whether or not a murder occurred, and that's the only issue at trial. So I would say maybe if she were on trial and her credibility mattered, then it would come in. But as far as on Donna's trial, I would say probably not. I would say it would be considered too tangential, but they might well cross-examine her. Isn't it true that you only let the Markels see them once, or twice? I think he testified a couple or three times. And she did seem to imply that it had not been withheld and that they were allowed to see them. Probably, if you were to go back and read very closely exactly what she said, it was accurate, just sort of led everybody to believe something a little bit different. So I also want to thank Marlon, and I want to thank Jamie for their super chats. And speaking of Marlon and also Mama Pinks, I want to say a shout out to our moderators. We have the world's best moderators, and they keep the chat just running smoothly and a lot of fun for everybody. I think that's one of the things people love about the channel is you can come to the chat and people are nice and it's enjoyable, and you can just talk about these really interesting cases. I also want to give a shout out to Angela, who's a longtime subscriber and facing some serious surgery next week. We are sending out our prayers, our good wishes to you, and just wanted to give you a shout out. we are about to do a special intro next week. Hopefully, we're going to be introducing memberships, and we are going to have some special emojis that you can use in the chat just for fun. Here, you are going to get to see Marlon designing one of these for us. So here you go. I'll see you Monday at 7.